This too is part of America's promise. The promise of a democracy where we can find the strength and grace to bridge divides and unite in common effort. Now, I know there are those who dismiss such beliefs as happy talk. They claim that our insistence on something larger, something firmer and more honest in our public life is just a Trojan horse for higher taxes and the abandonment of traditional values. And that's to be expected, because if you don't have any fresh ideas, then you use stale tactics to scare voters. If you don't have a record to run on, then you paint your opponent as someone people should run from. You make a big election about small things. And you know what? It's worked before. Because it feeds into the cynicism we all have about government. When Washington doesn't work, all its promises seem empty. If your hopes have been dashed again and again, then it's best to stop hoping and settle for what you already know. I get it. I realize that I'm not the likeliest candidate for this office. I don't fit the typical pedigree, and I haven't spent my career in the halls of Washington. But I stand before you tonight because all across America, something is stirring. What the naysayers don't understand is that this election has never been about me. It's about you. It's about you. For 18 long months, you have stood up one by one and said enough to the politics of the past. You understand that in this election, the greatest risk we can take is to try the same old politics with the same old players and expect a different result. You have shown what history teaches us, that at defining moments like this one, the change we need doesn't come from Washington. Change comes to Washington. Change happens because the American people demand it, because they rise up and insist on new ideas and new leadership, a new politics for a new time. America, this is one of those moments. I believe that as hard as it will be, the change we need is coming. Because I've seen it. Because I've lived it. Because I've seen it in Illinois when we provided health care to more children and moved more families from welfare to work. I've seen it in Washington, where we worked across party lines to open up government and hold lobbyists more accountable, to give better care for our veterans and keep nuclear weapons out of the hands of terrorists. And I've seen it in this campaign, in the young people who voted for the first time, and the young at heart, those who got involved again after a very long time, in the Republicans who never thought they'd pick up a Democratic ballot, but did. I've seen it in the workers who would rather cut their hours back a day, even though they can't afford it, than see their friends lose their jobs. In the soldiers who re-enlist after losing a limb. In the good neighbors who take a stranger in when a hurricane strikes and the floodwaters rise. You know, this country of ours has more wealth than any nation. But that's not what makes us rich. We have the most powerful military on earth, but that's not what makes us strong. Our universities and our culture are the envy of the world, but that's not what keeps the world coming to our shores. Instead, it is that American spirit, that American promise, that pushes us forward, even when the path is uncertain, that binds us together in spite of our differences, that makes us fix our eye not on what is seen, but what is unseen, that better place around the bend. That promise is our greatest inheritance. It's a promise I make to my daughters when I tuck them in at night, and a promise that you make to yours. A promise that has led immigrants to cross oceans and pioneers to travel west a promise that led workers to picket lines and women to reach for the ballot. And it is that promise that 45 years ago today brought Americans from every corner of this land to stand together on a mall in Washington before Lincoln's memorial and hear a young preacher from Georgia speak of his dream. The men and women who gathered there could have heard many things. They could have heard words of anger and discord. They could have been told to succumb to the fear and frustrations of so many dreams deferred. But what the people heard instead, people of every creed and color, from every walk of life, is that in America, our destiny is inextricably linked. That together, our dreams can be won. We cannot walk alone, the preacher cried. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. America, we cannot turn back. Not with so much work to be done. Not with so many children to educate and so many veterans to care for. Not with an economy to fix and cities to rebuild and farms to save. Not with so many families to protect and so many lives to mend. America, we cannot turn back. We cannot walk alone. At this moment, in this election, we must pledge once more to march into the future. Let us keep that promise, that American promise, and in the words of Scripture, hold firmly, without wavering, to the hope that we confess. Thank you. God bless you. And God bless the United States of America. All right, you got a little For presidential candidate.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
So once I started canvassing, the canvassing bug really bit me because I was able to talk to people about how dissatisfied they were with the country and where they wanted to go, and how I felt that Barack was the answer. I would have to say one of the ones that are really important to me, I love the planet. I wanted to be here for my kids. I wanted to be viable. A couple of years ago, I took my kids to the Grand Canyon, which was really an environmental wow moment for me. And to think that a lot of the beautiful things on the planet are not going to be here because of our own irresponsibility, that's kind of hitting me in the gut right now. The water, the fish, the air, the polar bears. I want those things to be here, so I really hope he gives it a shot looking at the so-called clean coal that's not really clean. And I think he needs to challenge the American people to get rid of oil as the bedrock of how we operate.
With each passing month, our country's faced increasingly difficult times. But everywhere I go, despite the economic crisis and war and uncertainty about tomorrow, I still see optimism and hope and strength. We've seen over the last 8 years how decisions by a president can have a profound effect on the course of history and on American lives. But much that's wrong in our country goes back even farther than that. We've been talking about the same problems for decades, and nothing is ever done to solve them. This election's a defining moment. the chance for our leaders to meet the demands of these challenging times and keep faith with our people. For the past 20 months, I've traveled the length of this country, and Michelle and I have met so many Americans who are looking for real and lasting change that makes a difference in their lives. Their stories are American stories, stories that reflect the state of our union. I'd like to introduce you to some of those people tonight. I'll also lay out in specific detail what I'll do as president to restore the long-term health of our economy and our middle class, and how I'll make the decisions to get us there. What struck me most about these stories you'll see tonight is not just the challenges these Americans face, but also their resolve to change this country.
I'm 72 years old and things are changing.
You just wonder, where am I going from here?
I spoke earlier about some of the immediate actions I'll take to address the economic crisis. We also have to take a longer view. We have to stop just talking about healthcare reform and lost jobs and energy independence, and finally do something about it. All across America, I've seen entrepreneurs and innovators who point the way to a better future, starting with energy independence. Recently, I visited the McKinstry Company in Seattle. They're retrofitting schools and office buildings to make them energy efficient, creating jobs, saving their customers money, reducing carbon emissions, and helping end our dependence on Middle Eastern oil. As president, I'll use companies like McKinstry as a model for the nation. I'll invest $15 billion a year in energy efficiency and renewable sources of energy, like wind, solar, and biofuels, creating 5 million clean energy jobs over the next decade, jobs that pay well and can never be outsourced. And I'll help our auto companies retool so that the fuel-efficient cars of the future are built right here in America. I'll also make it easier for you to afford these new cars with a tax credit so we can get as many on the road as possible. And to further reduce our demand for foreign oil, I'll tap our natural gas reserves, invest in clean coal technology, and expand domestic production of oil. But we know government can't do it all. That's why I'll call on every American to join in conservation efforts. I believe we need to usher in a new era of responsibility. Across the country, families are tightening their belts, and so should Washington. That's why, for my energy plan, my economic plan, and the other proposals you'll hear tonight, I've offered spending cuts above and beyond their cost. I'll also go through the federal budget, line by line, eliminating programs that don't work, and making the ones we do need work better and cost less. And one of the biggest savings we can make is to change our policy in Iraq.
We're currently spending $10 billion a month in Iraq when they have a $79 billion surplus. It seems to me that if we're going to be strong at home as well as strong abroad, that we've got to look at bringing that war to a close.
We are actually spending more in Iraq now than we were spending when the war first started. How many schools would that build? How many hospitals? How many people could get health care? How many college scholarships could we give our youth? It's time for us to invest some of that money right here in America.
When I read his economic plan and I saw the people endorsing it and all the new ideas, Warren Buffett and others, I thought, this is the right plan for America.
Juliana Sanchez is a widow with 2 children and a mortgage. Her parents, Richard and Francis, were both educators. Like her family, Juliana's devoted her life to giving her daughter, Jessica, and son, Adam, a good education.
It starts in our homes. No education policy can replace a parent who's involved in their child's education from day one, who makes sure their children are in school on time, helps them with their homework, and attends those parent-teacher conferences. No government program can turn off the TV set, or put away the video games, or read to your children